Hey there, this is Nathan. The late afternoon sun stretches across the rows of grapevines, highlighting the rich green leaves with streaks of amber. Uncle James watches from the porch, sitting stiffly in the rocking chair he's refused to abandon even after his heart surgery. He looks thinner than I remember, his frame swallowed by a maroon cardigan, but his voice is steady when he calls out. Quit dragging your feet, Nathan. Those baskets won't walk up here themselves. Still a slave driver, I see, I reply, setting down 2 full baskets of grapes at the porch steps. Sweat clings to my shirt, and my arms ache in that oddly satisfying way hard work leaves behind. Someone has to keep you on your toes. James smirks, but I can tell he's struggling to keep up the facade of strength. His recovery hasn't been easy. The vineyard feels both foreign and familiar. I spent summers here as a kid, dodging bees and sneaking sips of wine when no one was looking. Now, at 38, I'm back, not as a carefree boy but as someone who understands the weight of this place. James has poured his life into these vines, and the thought of losing him, presses heavier than I care to admit. I drop onto the porch steps beside the baskets and glance at my phone. A text from Rebecca flashes across the screen, FaceTime in 5. She calls right on time. Her face fills the screen, framed by messy blonde hair she's pinned up. She's at the gallery, her desk a chaos of papers and her laptop teetering dangerously close to the edge. Hey, mountain man, she says, a smile tugging at her lips. Not much climbing out here. Just grapes and dirt. I flip the camera to show the rows of vines stretching into the distance. She leans closer to her screen. That's gorgeous. I'd kill for some fresh air right now. Rebecca's been buried in work, prepping for her gallery's biggest exhibition yet. Abstract photography isn't my thing, but when she talks about it, her energy is magnetic. I tease her about art speak. Sometimes, but I've never met anyone who can sell a vision the way she can. How's Uncle James? She asks, pulling me out of my thoughts. Bossy as ever. Which is a good sign, I think. Good. Someone needs to keep you in line. She pauses, her smile faltering for a second before bouncing back. I miss you. I miss you too. I say, the words coming easier than I expected. I'll make it up to you when I'm back. We can hike, maybe? Someplace new. She nods, but there's something off, a tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers drum the edge of her desk. We'll see. I've got a lot going on with this exhibition. It's a lot. You'll crush it. You always do. Her lips twitch, almost a smile, and then she glances off screen, distracted by something I can't see. I should get back to it. Don't let James work you to death, okay? I'll try. Love you. Love you too. The call ends, leaving the porch strangely quiet. I sit there for a moment, staring at the screen. Rebecca and I have spent time apart before, work trips, family visits, but this feels different. She's always been the one with boundless energy, the one pulling me along when I'd rather stay still. Hearing her sound, tired, makes my chest tighten. Everything okay? James asks, breaking the silence. Yeah, I lie, slipping the phone into my pocket. She's busy with work. Big exhibition coming up. Sounds like she's got her hands full. You're lucky, you know. Not everyone finds someone who matches their stride. I nod, but his words linger. Rebecca and I have always been in sync, hiking trails, building our life in Boulder, chasing light for the perfect photo. But lately it feels like we're running parallel tracks, close but not quite connected. I shake off the thought and stand, stretching my legs. The vineyard is alive with movement, clippers snapping, workers laughing, the distant hum of the tractor. It's comforting, in a way, to focus on something tangible. These vines don't care about gallery exhibitions or long-distance FaceTime calls. They just grow. But as I haul the baskets toward the press, I can't help wondering, when did Rebecca and I start growing in separate directions? The sun sets over the mountains as I pull into the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. I'm home a day early, Uncle James insisting I head back. The vineyard could manage without me, he said, and honestly, I couldn't argue. The house is quiet when I step inside, the kind of quiet that feels wrong. Something's off. The faint smell of turpentine drifts through the air, leading me to Rebecca's studio. Her door's ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Inside, the room is chaotic, nothing like her usual precision. Canvases with angry streaks of red and black lean against the walls, supplies scattered across the desk. A strange mix of glitter, wireframes, and plaster mold sits in one corner. Rebecca's always been organized, methodical in her art. This feels unhinged. I call out her name, but there's no answer. My phone buzzes in my pocket, a text. Late meeting at the gallery. Won't be home till 10. I toss my bag on the couch and sit, tension curling in my chest. It started last week, over one of our nightly FaceTime calls. I've been watching this documentary series, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. It's about relationship anarchy. Have you heard of it? Relationship what? Anarchy, she repeated, like it was the most natural thing in the world. It's a philosophy where relationships aren't bound by rules. You define them, without labels or expectations. I laughed. Sounds like one of your workshops. Her smile faltered for a moment. It's not about workshops, Nathan. It's about freedom, living authentically, without the boxes society forces us into. And this is inspiring. How? It makes you think about what we value and why, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Amelia's been exploring it in her work. She's brilliant. Amelia? The name stuck in my throat like a bitter pill. Rebecca brushed it off, but since then, things had shifted. New people, new habits, new obsessions. Her wardrobe had transformed, bold colors, edgy cuts replacing her usual muted tones. She'd become glued to social media, flooding her feed with curated posts, tagging artists, and hashtagging everything. Even her phone, once an open book, was suddenly locked. Gallery security, she said when I asked. Now, standing in her studio, I scan the clutter, trying to piece together what's happening. On the desk, her tablet lies open. The email subject lines are impossible to ignore. Follow up on modern intimacy proposal, Thursday night planning, collaboration idea with Amelia. I shut it with a snap, guilt prickling my skin. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is all part of her work. But the doubt lingers, heavy and persistent. When Rebecca finally walks through the door, it's late, close to midnight. She looks startled to see me, her arms full of paint-smeared jeans and a sketch pad. Nathan, she says, forcing a smile. What are you doing here? I thought you were coming tomorrow. James sent me back early. She sets her things down carefully, her movements deliberate. How's he doing? Better. Tired but recovering. I pause, watching her. The studio looks different. Her smile tightens. Yeah, I've been experimenting. With glitter and wireframes? She laughs, but it's strained. It's for a new series. Pushing boundaries. You know how it is. I nod, though I'm not sure I do. Boundaries, huh? Like late nights and locked phones? Her eyes narrow slightly, her defenses rising. The phone's for security, Nathan. The gallery's been dealing with some issues. Right. The silence between us stretches, taut and uncomfortable. She glances at the clock, then back at me. I'm exhausted. Can we talk tomorrow? I nod again, even though my mind races with questions. She heads upstairs, her footsteps soft on the stairs. I sit on the couch, staring at the studio door, the smell of turpentine still hanging in the air. Something's changed. Something I can't quite name yet. Copenhagen was supposed to be a fresh start, a distraction, something big enough to swallow the gnawing tension in my gut. 6 weeks away, diving headfirst into a sustainable architecture project with some of the brightest minds in the field. The kind of opportunity that architects dream about. But even as I packed my suitcase, Rebecca's voice in the background, casual but distant, kept pulling me back to the ground. 6 weeks isn't that long, she said, scrolling through her phone. It'll fly by. You could visit, I offered, testing the waters. Her eyes flicked up briefly. I've got the gallery's summer showcase. You know how busy it gets. And that was that. The first few days in Copenhagen were a blur of meetings, presentations, and networking dinners. I threw myself into it, answering emails at midnight, walking the city streets in the rare quiet hours. But every time I opened Instagram, Rebecca's cryptic stories popped up like thorns. Photos of neon-lit gatherings, captions like, "Freedom is an art form," and "The performance continues." Her smile was always there, but it looked different. Stretched thin, like paint smeared too far across a canvas. Our FaceTime calls, once a nightly ritual, became sporadic. When she did pick up, she'd wave off my questions with excuses. "Gallery emergencies," she said, her voice muffled by late-night chaos. I'd catch snippets of laughter, voices in the background, none of them familiar. "Everything okay?" I asked once, the words feeling heavy even as they left my mouth. "Of course," she said, her tone breezy but sharp. "It's all under control. You don't need to worry." But I did. The email came during week 3. Anonymous, no subject line, no context. Just a single sentence and a link. "Thought you should see this." I clicked. Rebecca, center stage at some underground gallery event, dressed in layers of flowing fabric and glitter, her arms tangled around Amelia and 2 others I didn't recognize. They stood in a circle, lit by dim red light, their poses intimate. The caption beneath the photo read, "Breaking the Mold, an exploration of love and art." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. My stomach twisted. Then came the photos from mutual friends. Rebecca, always at the edge of the frame, her arms slung around someone new, her smile caught mid-laugh. None of it was outright damning, but together it painted a picture I couldn't ignore. The credit card statements were next. Charges from boutique wine shops, late-night cafes, art supply stores I'd never heard of. Every line felt like a tiny crack in the foundation we built. By week 4 I'd had enough. The plane ticket home burned a hole in my inbox. Copenhagen could wait. When I walked into the house, the air felt wrong. Quiet, but not the good kind. A wine bottle sat open on the kitchen counter, 2 glasses beside it. A faint, sour smell of stale Merlot hung in the air. I stepped into her studio, my pulse hammering. The walls were covered in sketches and half-finished canvases, some of them depicting tangled figures in intimate poses. I ran my fingers over the edge of her desk, tracing a line through the scattered supplies. A stack of letters caught my eye, tucked beneath a notebook. I picked them up, my hands trembling. "Nathan," the first one started, the handwriting rushed and uneven. "This isn't about you. It's about me. About finding myself again." Each letter unraveled a little more, words like freedom, rediscovery, and breaking free scrawled across the pages. They were never finished, always stopping mid-thought. Like she couldn't quite bring herself to say it outright. My chest felt tight, the weight of it pressing harder with every second. I dropped the letters and turned toward the door, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The house was empty, but somehow it felt louder than ever. I never thought I'd hire a private investigator, let alone sit across from one in a dimly lit office, scanning grainy photos and notes like I was some noir detective unraveling a case. But after coming home to the hollow echoes of an empty house, after finding those unfinished letters and stacks of cryptic art supplies, it felt inevitable. The investigator laid everything out methodically: receipts from boutique wine bars, records of late-night gallery access, a few photos of Rebecca at gatherings that blurred the line between avant-garde and unhinged. Each piece painted a sharper, more damning picture. "She's dedicated to her craft," the investigator said dryly, tapping a finger on a candid shot of Rebecca locked in conversation with Amelia and another man. I stared at the photo, something bitter clawing its way up my throat. "You've got enough here," the investigator added. "If it comes to legal action, this will hold." Legal action wasn't where my mind was headed. Not yet. I had questions, and I needed answers from her directly. I packed up a few essentials, leaving the house and Boulder behind. My new apartment in Denver wasn't much, a small loft above a bakery in the art district. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was mine. And it was far enough from Rebecca's world to let me think clearly for the first time in weeks. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I'd planned to meet her at home, maybe over dinner or a drink. Instead, it happened at one of her gallery openings, the kind of event she used to love dragging me to, filled with dim lighting, whispered conversations, and overpriced wine. Rebecca was the centerpiece, of course. Literally. Her latest performance piece, Living Art, Freedom in Fragments, had her perched on a raised platform, draped in flowing fabric and surrounded by 7 others. They moved together like gears in some abstract machine, touching, leaning, entwining. The room buzzed with murmured approval. I stood frozen, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Amelia was there too, one of the 7, her hand trailing Rebecca's arm as they moved in unison. The placard next to the display spelled it out plainly. An exploration of intimacy as an evolving medium, featuring real connections from the artist's life. Real connections. 7 partners. Someone beside me whispered. 12 performances so far. She's really pushing boundaries. My stomach churned. Boundaries? Was that what this was? Rebecca spotted me then, her eyes locking onto mine for a brief, flickering moment before she looked away. I left before the piece ended. The next morning, she called. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. Can we meet? There's a lot to unpack. She chose a local coffee shop. Of course, it had to be somewhere public, neutral. I wanted to explain everything. She began, stirring her latte with deliberate slowness. You deserve that much. You think? I snapped. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She exhaled, setting the spoon down carefully. It's not what you think. This isn't about cheating or betrayal. It's about art. I leaned forward, my palms pressed flat against the table. Art? 7 people. 12, whatever those were. And that's supposed to be art? Her lips curved into a faint, rueful smile. It's not about numbers, Nathan. It's about freedom. Expression. Love as an evolving medium. I shook my head, the words bouncing off me like pebbles. What the hell does that even mean? She launched into it then. The philosophy, the movement. Anarchist art, she called it. A rejection of traditional boundaries, a celebration of fluid connections. Every encounter, every so-called relationship, meticulously documented and recorded as part of her living portfolio. It's not personal, she insisted. You're part of it too, Nathan. Everything we've shared, everything we've built, it's all part of the performance. The performance. That's what you're calling it now? My voice cracked, the weight of her words pressing down hard. Our life, our marriage, it's a goddamn performance to you? She flinched, but only slightly. It's more than that. It's a statement. A challenge to societal norms. I pushed my chair back, the screech of wood against tile cutting through the low hum of the cafe. My heart pounded in my chest, anger and disbelief fighting for dominance. You manipulated me, I said quietly, the words trembling with restrained fury. Used our life, me, as a prop in your little experiment. It's not like that, she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. It's exactly like that. Her face fell then, the calm facade cracking just enough to reveal the uncertainty beneath. I stood, grabbing my coat. You wanted freedom, Rebecca? Congratulations. You've got it. The gallery board made their decisions swiftly. Rebecca's living art performance and the revelations that followed had divided the art community like a fault line. Half lauded her as a bold provocateur, pushing boundaries and forcing uncomfortable conversations. The other half, including several key donors, saw her as reckless and manipulative, dragging the gallery's reputation down with her. The exhibition was cancelled within the week. Officially, it was a pause to reassess curatorial direction. Unofficially, the board couldn't risk further backlash from sponsors or the legal battles brewing in the wake of Rebecca's performances. Rebecca's parents, artists themselves, tried to step in. They reached out to me twice, once through a carefully worded email and once through an unexpected visit to the Denver loft. "She's misunderstood," her mother said, her voice wavering between maternal concern and defensive pride. "You have to see that. This is how she's always expressed herself, through her work." I let them talk, though it felt like they were defending a version of Rebecca I hadn't seen in years. When they left, I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle Uncle James had sent, the label scrawled with his shaky handwriting. "You've always got a place here." I took him up on that offer a few weeks later. Napa was quieter than I remembered, the vineyards rolling hills soaked in late autumn light. Uncle James had recovered well from his surgery, though he moved slower now, leaning on a cane as he showed me the new rows of vines. "You've been through the ringer, kid," he said one evening, setting 2 glasses of his best Cabernet on the porch railing. "But you're here. That's what matters." I nodded, sipping the wine, letting the warmth settle deep in my chest. Back in Colorado, I started rebuilding in small, deliberate steps. My camera, untouched for months, became my constant companion again. I found solace in mountain climbing groups, joining others who understood the restorative power of scaling something daunting and solid when everything else felt uncertain. The Tiny Homes project came next, a collaboration with an old friend from my architecture days. We designed sustainable living spaces for low-income families, balancing form and function in ways that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with architecture in the first place. Rebecca, meanwhile, leaned further into her version of freedom. She joined a European art collective known for its boundary-pushing exhibitions, moving to Berlin within months of the gallery fallout. We exchanged one last email, a surprisingly civil back-and-forth about dividing our shared art collection. She kept most of her pieces. I took mine and tucked them away in storage. The legal proceedings were a slow grind. Rebecca's performances had blurred too many lines, between personal and professional, between relationship and art. Copyright issues arose over her documentation, particularly the parts that included me. The gallery's legal team reached out, and I provided what evidence I could. By the end, Rebecca faced restrictions on how she could use certain works, though she spun it as a new chapter in creative evolution. I didn't care. My focus had shifted entirely. 6 months after the confrontation, I held my first solo photography exhibition in nearly a decade. Trust in Ruins wasn't a loud declaration or a pointed critique. It was quiet, reflective, capturing the beauty in broken things, abandoned cabins, fractured rock faces, rusting machinery left to the elements. People lingered in front of the photos longer than I expected, murmuring about the sense of calm and resilience they found in the images. "This one," a woman said, pointing to a shot of an old, vine-covered gate, sunlight filtering through the cracks. "It's sad but hopeful too. Like something's still growing there." I smiled, unsure how to respond. She wasn't wrong. The opening night was small, intimate, filled with a mix of strangers and familiar faces. Uncle James sent another bottle of wine, though he couldn't make the trip. My climbing group came, teasing me about trading mountains for art galleries. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the room, I felt something settle, a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. Rebecca's path was hers to walk. Mine had led me here, to this moment, with its cracked edges and stubborn light. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, uneven, like the terrain I climbed each weekend or the photos I took of forgotten places. But it was mine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, that was enough.